Hello everyone, and hello Dr. Patricia Worby, who's my friend and colleague who inspires me all the time with all the things she knows about so much stuff, and can usually explain what's happening in the body. I want to tell everyone today, as Patricia knows, I have moved house about 2 weeks ago now, and it was hard, having had a very painful back after breaking my back last year. It was a difficult thing to move for the second time in 6 months. And even when someone else is doing all the heavy carrying, I think it's just not in my nature to stand there watching. So of course I did do loads of stuff, and there were a couple of days when I could barely walk by the end of the day at all. But the exciting thing, which I shared with Patricia, is that having had a lifetime of ME type symptoms, so that awful crushing tiredness that's beyond tiredness when we crash, I've had that on and off all my life and recovered in the last few years, and it's been an amazing change. And it was very, very exciting. It might sound odd to someone who hasn't experienced that type of fatigue, but to be exhausted, really tired out, struggling to move because I was in pain, and I didn't feel ill. And the exciting thing for anyone out there who is watching this, who is going through or has gone through chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, CFS, ME, they'll really understand how exciting this actually is. To be tired, having done something quite hard to do physically and mentally, and yet not feel that awful tiredness. And I know that you understand what I'm saying about this, Patricia, because I think you felt the same sort of thing. And it's a funny thing to say you're excited about, isn't it? Absolutely worn out and saying, I'm so tired, but I'm really excited that I'm not ill tired. And it's a very different feeling. Do you want to say a little bit about how you felt in the past as well?
Well, I have also had a bout of CFS-ME when I was 34. Which kind of came on, but I didn't know the warning signs, and I didn't know what it was at the time. And I thought I possibly was losing my mind at the time because I just started to lose sleep. I couldn't sleep, and I got very anxious. But then it was very physical. The final sort of hit was really physical, where because I'd been pushing through, which I'll talk about what that means, but just ignoring all the warning signs and just keeping going and trying to put more effort into things to work a full day. And by the time I did it, actually at the time I was working as a garden designer, and I remember I had a show, a show to actually show my work and talk to punters and that sort of thing. And I had a weekend long, I had to pack up all this stuff and take it over to the site and put it up, and it was meant to be a whole weekend. And by the Sunday of that weekend, I took someone with me, a friend actually came with me to help me, and I said, I'm going to have to lie down because I just can't stand up anymore. And I never got up, basically. I went to the car and I lay down, and that was it. When I tried to get up, everything swam, everything was really dizzy. And she had to drive me home, and then drive me to my mum's. Bear in mind, you're 34, you think your life has begun, you're sort of, you're trying to make your life as an independent person. And I had to be deposited there and left for several weeks while she basically put me to bed, fed me, encouraged me to sort of brush my hair, things like that just became almost impossible. So let me tell you, fatigue is not the same as being tired. It is, rest doesn't, because you don't really rest anyway, because you're wired at the same time as feeling absolutely exhausted. So your nervous system has collapsed into freeze response, and you are with occasional forays into fight and flight. So you feel both really, really anxious and also completely flat. It is the most awful syndrome. And if you don't know what's happening and you don't know what to do, you immediately think you're dying. I mean, I just thought the end had come, honestly, because I'm a bit of a anxious thinker. But, it felt like dying, and I'm not going to lie about that. It was just awful. And I think my mum was quite frightened for me because she didn't know what it was. We are talking 20 years ago. There was less awareness then of what CFSME is. But I think the first thing to know is that these conditions have a precedent. They're not just like an infectious disease that come on randomly. There's certain personality characteristics, driven, usually a person who's quite self-driven, quite hard-working, quite diligent, but also emotionally very blocked. And I can say that as a person because I know I just wasn't really dealing with my stuff. I had lost my father when I was younger. I know you have too. And so I had just put the blinkers on, like you do, and just focused on trying to make a life, but without realizing that unprocessed emotions actually have a physical correlate. They drive adrenal fatigue or adrenal dysfunction. And over time, you can't maintain your body systems, and that's when your energy starts to deplete until it reaches a threshold level below which you can barely function. And that's what happens when you call it the crash.
Yeah,
you mentioned it earlier.
Yes, and that, I think one of the things that we can perhaps also have a quick look at today as well is that delayed fatigue, because I experienced that on and off, for just most of my adult life. And it was an awful thing because I looked so healthy and happy, and I was someone who was always full of life. And I would do something like a bike ride, and then 2 days later, I remember when I lived with my children in France, and we did loads of sport, and they were very, very active, youngsters, and I loved spending my life with them. And I'd get up in the morning, either the day after, usually 2 days after having done it before, and I'd get up feeling absolutely ready to go, and we'd kind of a bit tired, but all right, and we'd get things ready. And there was a weird cut-off point around about 11 o'clock in the morning where if we hadn't got up and gone by that point, I would suddenly start looking a bit, they'd look at me and say, "Mum, are you all right?" And I'd go a bit grey looking and exhausted looking. And then all of a sudden I'd say, "Oh," and my voice would go a little bit slurry and strange. And I'd say, "I just need to go and lie down." I couldn't actually sit up anymore. So it had to be lying down flat. And I would go and lie down, and I would be in bed for several hours in a weird sort of zonked out state, not actually asleep, just strange. That happened on and off, really for many, many years. And it was often after I'd done something a tiny bit more than usual. So maybe a 12-mile ride instead of a 9-mile ride, something like that, or a hill when I was already a bit tired or something like that. And then it started happening without bike rides. It started happening with just normal everyday life. And like you say, that threshold, you can feel yourself just sinking below it. And there were many times, one of my worst times, I was ill for several months, virtually in bed for months. And I struggled to brush my teeth. I couldn't get upstairs. It was just impossible. How do you describe to someone your legs, you're telling them to move and they don't seem to be able to. They feel like lead. And I also used to sort of pass out. I'd be talking to someone and then just disappear and roll my eyes apparently and look as if I was about to fall over. And my speech was awful when I was like that. And like you say, I just at that point, that worst time, I just thought, this is me on my way out. Doctors had never been able to find what on earth to do with me. And there's part of you that does just think, well, I'm just dying here. My whole system is dying off, and I can't stop it. And obviously I did, and I found my way through it. And, as we both have, and so many, many other people. And I think it's really exciting to know that we can get completely well and then do all the everyday life things. But having learned so much, like you said, about all those predisposing factors, and learning about our own selves and how we function in the world, and the idea of pushing through and not being able to say no. And we could go on about this, and I'm sure we will in other talks. But what about the delayed fatigue, that strange thing, Patricia, about being tired when you finish something, but actually then going downhill later on? What's happening there?
I think there's two things at play there. First of all, I think there's adrenaline. Adrenaline, which is your fight and flight hormone, comes in if cortisol, it comes in initially, and cortisol is then meant to balance it. But if you are adrenally dysfunctional, which a lot of women are, and you've exhausted your cortisol balancing, you just get these shots of adrenaline, which will make you feel good initially to get through the thing, whatever the stress is, but then wham, when that runs out and you've got no balance in cortisol, because women particularly don't have the testosterone, which helps to sort of just keep it all going, we are much more prone to fatigue, and then that's when you fall down. So I think that's one definite factor. The other thing I think is to do with your energy currency, ATP, and that takes 2 days to recycle. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, so it's got 3 phosphate groups, and the phosphate molecules are broken off in sequence. So you go down to diphosphate, ADP, and then another one, AMP, monophosphate. Now, normally ATP, ADP are recycled with the addition or removal of phosphates. And that's how it's meant to function. But if you exhaust yourself beyond your capabilities, which a lot of women do, particularly if they're under emotional stress as well, then you go down to the bottom one, which is AMP, and that takes 2 days. So it can often be a delayed reaction where you kept going and you kept going, and then suddenly, boom, you hit the bottom level, which just doesn't allow you to recycle very quickly, and you need to usually 2 days rest. Although it does decrease as you begin to look at all the other factors, the gut factors, for instance, toxicity, poor digestion. Usually, as I said, adrenal thyroid function has been stressed for years before you reach that point. You've not been looking at it and you've not known it, and your GP doesn't test for it really. So there's all these issues that need to be addressed. As I've said, the emotional issue is massive. It's so huge as well. You likely have had some unresolved traumas or past experiences which have really knocked your nervous system, and it's found it very, very difficult to recover, to actually rebalance itself, because you've not processed it properly and you've not been held and supported to process, because a lot of us believe we're on our own and we've got to be strong, and we don't get the support of people who understand. So I think there's all of those things going in to why it can sometimes take 2 days to hit you, and then it takes a few days to recover. But in the process of recovery, you have to learn to work with your body instead of against it. And I think that's just so important. You did mention one thing which I wanted to pick up on, which isn't specific about your question, but you said your muscles fail to work and then your speech would go. The point is the body runs out of energy, and so it has to prioritise the things that keep you alive: your heart pumping, your liver filtering, and your kidneys. And so what are the expendables in the body? Skeletal muscle, some brain function. Obviously, it needs to keep the back brain going, the one that regulates your blood pressure and keeps your heart going. But your thinking brain, the one that regulates speech and creative thought and all of that, starts to go, because that isn't essential to keep you alive. And so those are why you get those sorts of symptoms first. It's not that your body is trying to kill you, it's actually trying to keep you alive. But of course it ruins your quality of life, and it's frightening, very frightening.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And I remember I used to call it survival mode. And I work with clients all this time as well. And I used to say, I remember one client asking me about, and I was a kinesiologist then, and she said, "Oh, Jane," and we were talking about her house, and I could tell that she was wearing loads of clothes. And I got this, and I said, do you heat your house? And she said, "Oh, well, it's too expensive, so I just wear extra clothes, and I'm wearing a hat now and gloves and so on." And we did lots of testing around that with kinesiology, and it was so interesting that it was the top of the list for her in terms of her health. She had all kinds of health issues, and in fact, that was absolutely number one, was deciding to spend the money however she could do it and heat her house, because we worked out, and she really understood it, that she was in survival mode. So if you're actually just struggling to keep warm, then you cannot be creative. And it's exactly what you've described there, isn't it? And that's how I felt. I used to say, "Oh, I've gone into survival mode again." So my own way of expressing what I could tell was happening, that I was surviving, but that was all.
Yeah.
And then how can you think about something you want to write, or how can you go to work? How can you answer other people's questions? And, you know, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
But the good news is, of course, we can recover, and you know, I was writing notes for my new website the other day, and I was thinking, well, it's all about recovery. Basically,
Yes.
my life's all been about recovery, recovery from trauma, recovery from emotional events, recovery from illness, recovery from accidents. And it's actually how well we recover and what we learn in the recovery process, isn't it? So it's not just repeating it and recovering and saying, oh, I'm fine again. It's actually, what do we learn in that time? And I suppose we're all inspired by so many people out there who've gone through really difficult life events, whether it's, you know, recovering from cancer or a breakup or a bereavement. And when they write about what they learned, it's usually what they learned about themselves, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So recovery isn't about going back to what you were, you know, because the illness has come along to really show you where you weren't following the right path for you in some way. And for me, it was the career I was following was close in some ways because it's a lovely creative thing. You're working with plants. But it's also quite admin heavy. It's also very pushy, salesy sort of job. And it just wasn't right for me, but I didn't know. It was the closest thing I could find at the time. But I think that came along, and it came along to show me that I wasn't in the right place in terms of my living arrangements. I hadn't dealt with some stuff. I was still overworking and pushing myself beyond my nervous system capability. That was another thing. And so recovery for me hasn't been about going back to the me I was. It's recreating myself from the ground up, creating a new foundation that says my needs are important. I need to learn to say no. I need to learn to say when something hurts me. I need to be able to say I'm not always strong, and sometimes I'm weak, and that's okay. I can own my vulnerability, but not see it as a failing. I can actually own it and say, well, yeah, because I'm vulnerable, because I'm human, and because I'm also a highly sensitive person, so I absorb stuff from my environment, from other people. So recovery for me has been about learning my limitations in a good way and keeping within those, and also growing in other ways so that I can take on different things that allow me to use my sensitivity. And now, of course, I'm a therapist, which is a completely unprogrammed change of career. I hadn't ever seen that I would become that, but my own experiences have led me to realize that we can't just paper over cracks. And we see this all the time. You know, we're supposed to just get on and pretend things are fine, and they're not. And sometimes we need to be able to speak our truth. You know, that has been the most important thing I've learned. And to find out who I really am. Who am I? You know, all my sufferings, all my sorrows, but all my joys, all the things that have lit me up in the past, and how am I going to enhance those now? And I'm going through another period of some change at the moment, actually, as we speak. You know, I'm talking as if it's all in the past, and I do want to highlight actually that recovery also is bumpy. Okay, it isn't, or you know, it's neither of those things. It's an up and down, generally in the up direction, but you do get blips along the way. And what I've realized is right now, because I'm dealing with some stuff in my own family, is when I am denied support or I feel I'm totally responsible for something, that's my trigger. Okay. And you can probably tell from my voice, there are some things going on at the moment which have really hit me very hard. And I've been here before. I'm not fatigued. That's the good news, because it's early days. These are the early warning signs. Insomnia and anxiety are much more my early warning signals. And I'm working on that. I'm dealing with it. I'm trying to do my best by reaching out and talking to people and saying, you know, I need you to do this, this, and this, and I need to be kept informed, and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, hopefully I will never hit that wall again where I bump along the bottom and can barely walk. You know, that is not happening. But I can feel my nervous system it's very stressed right now. So I'm really having to look after that as in any way I can, with herbs, with acupuncture, with a lot more rest. Rest and playing are really important. So making sure I'm not working all the time. So yeah, people, this is not a one-way street. It does tend to, you will bounce around a little bit, but you will always learn something from it. And if you can hold your head and realize that you're not faulty, that your body is just responding to its environment, and maybe there's something that needs adjusting in your environment. I think when we understand that, we can move forward.
Yes, I think that's so true. And I think certainly the pushing through, and that our own, not recognizing our own limitations, I suppose, and they used to annoy me. And I think that it's recognizing those very early signs, isn't it? It's being able to see, if I start to feel overwhelmed by things, I think, okay, Jane. So I'll give you a very simple example, which I'd like to look at again with you. We'll talk about this perhaps. I mean, obviously I'm working on recovery, and I'm helping other people with, particularly with the brain recovery, because when we've been in those difficult situations, lacking sleep, anxiety, usually nutritional problems as well. For me, my gut wasn't functioning properly, even though I thought it was, and so on. So the system it feels in danger. And so we have those awful symptoms, and then we can end up with the fatigue. But I certainly find that my brain doesn't function quite as it used to do. And it's become really my passion as the years have gone on to look at, well, what can I do with this, with other people, and now with me? And interestingly, we notice, all of us, I think, whenever we talk to anyone who has had any fatigue, we notice that we can see those same patterns starting to reappear again. So although I don't crash and feel ill now, I can still see, for example, I've joined a program to do brain training. And I noticed the other day that I was feeling a bit low after I'd done it. And I thought, gosh, Jane, same stuff, wanting to achieve, wanting to show myself that I could do it, worried about how well I was doing on it, not seeing any great improvement in 3 days, you know what I mean? And it's that, okay, then let's take the pressure out of this. You know, it's a year program. So let's just see if I could have improved a little bit in a year instead of, and I think so much of that is unconscious as well, which we can talk about another time. But you're right, it's the ups and downs, and it's a recognition of ourselves, and that we keep on changing and growing. And there are little bits of us we think, yeah, that's that same stuff. And I've learned, and I get my clients to do this, to say, yeah, with a smile, that's that old stuff I used to do. That's that stuff I used to always do. And I'm recognizing it now. I'm not doing that right now. And if you can do it with a smile rather than, oh my gosh, no, I mustn't do it, because that's a very different energy. But being able to laugh at ourselves and say, yeah, I've seen this one before.
Yeah, recognition
helps hugely.
Yeah. I'm recognizing I have a pattern of panic. So if I can't control something, if I can't fix it, I panic. There's a part of me that feels I should know the answer to everything. And when I don't, or I can't solve someone that's suffering, particularly as a therapist, you want to help people. But when it's in your own family, it's not as easy, because they haven't chosen to come to you. Maybe like my mum, they're elderly, and you know, some of the methods I used, she just wouldn't get or be cognitively able to follow. And you feel so impotent, don't you? So I think it raises a very important point about what your nervous system is there to do. So your nervous system has a set sort of adjustment for different activities, and ideally you'd be in the top level, which is the creative part of your nervous system, which is a lovely parasympathetic flow state. All right, now we know that we can't be in that state the whole time, and that there will be challenges in life, in which case we'll need the fight and flight system, second tier system, for just those moments when you need to gear up, and that's where your adrenaline, cortisol come in. And then there's this third system, which is your survival system, which is the freeze state or immobilization state. And it's a bit like hibernation in animals. And that's the one that I think you and I have both been in. And if any listeners have also had or have CFSME, you'll know what it feels like. And this is the basis, I guess, of the really poor functioning. I mean, you basically are existing in a state that is like hibernation, and trying to maintain very complex systems. You know, the human brain is very complex, it's very energy hungry, Our nervous system relays information from our gut to our brain and from our heart to our brain. So when we have no energy left, we just sink into a very poor functioning state, and it's very noticeable that we're not who we were. We don't have capacity for play, for imagination, for our passions in life. Those are the first ones to go, and they're one of the early warning signs, actually, is if you are, for instance, you're prioritizing work to the exclusion of everything else just to keep going. That is a red flag, okay, that you may be heading for a fatigue-related illness. So we just need to wake people up to this concept that the nervous system is it's kind of your tuning fork for life, and it tells you where you are at any one time, and the flow between states is really important. But when you get stuck in this bottom freeze state, you are really, really not going to function well. And so we have to learn a new way of living.
We do. And that would lead us to maybe next time. Could we talk about play next time and what actually that does for us? Because I think it's such a vital thing. I know we can't switch from people who are sitting there at the moment thinking, oh, I'm in survival mode. I can't even cope with the idea of play. But in our lives, generally speaking, can actually start to prioritize play more than we do. And I think that would be a really good thing to look at next time.
Yeah, it would be fantastic. Let's do that.
Lovely to talk to you today then. We'll stop there. There's so much.
Thank you.
This, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye everyone.